Today on BRStv, all these ULM tanks are ready, and it's time to start talking results and what low maintenance even means, then give away one of these Avast Marine Kalk reactors that help make this happen. I'm Ryan, your host of BRStv Tank Trials ULM Edition. This is episode 21 of ULM and development of an ultra-low maintenance system. The goal is a stable, show-caliber reef tank which requires as little maintenance as possible, potentially performing only a few minutes of maintenance a month. So we're there now. It's time to see if there's any proof in the pudding, and will the results be worth the effort put into this? So today we're going to cover a few things. What will maintenance look like on these tanks? How am I going to track it? And finish with answering one of the most important questions of this whole series. So starting with the softy and polyp tank, our decision to implement automatic water changes with the Neptune dose is going to make this pretty darn simple. We've covered the simple testing needs last week, and beyond that, I'm pretty sure maintenance is going to be clean the glass and empty the skimmer cup once a week, so 2 to 3 minutes there. Then once a month, mix up a batch of saltwater for water changes, change the carbon out, and clean off the rocks, which I ended up doing with a P-mup zip tied to a rod. All of this takes maybe 15 minutes once a month. Then quarterly, swap out the MB10's wet side with clean ones and soak the dirty ones in citric acid for next time. Also, because we're running redundant dual return pumps, it allows me to remove one, soak it in vinegar or citric acid solution for a few hours, clean it, and put it back in the tank without the tank missing a beat. Not counting soaking time, maybe 15 to 20 minutes to remove, clean, maintenance, and replace the power heads and return pumps. So we're certainly hoping here for a couple minutes a week, 15 minutes once a month, and 15 to 20 minutes once a quarter. Many of these tasks enter into the Apex reminders. I can tell you there's a tiny fraction of the amount of time that I normally spend on a tank. Absolutely ultra low maintenance and fits the time that most people have available for an office tank like these. Much of the gains here are related to the selection of an easy to take care of tank coupled with an auto water change system. The proof will certainly be in the pudding, so I'm going to throw a quick calendar on the tank and record anything that I do to the tank and how much time it took. So in one of the future updates, we can show not just the results of our efforts and how the tank looks then, but also a legit record of the amount of effort we put in to achieve those results. The LPS tank will be somewhat similar with weekly glass cleaning, but I'll also dose the Red Sea trace colors based on how much saturated calc solution that we dose from the calc reactor. Monthly, I'll clean out the rocks with our P-mup, change the carbon, and if our Triton ICP test tells us it's necessary to perform a water change, I will, but otherwise if the tank looks healthy and the chemistry is spot on, I just don't see a need for a water change. However, once a month, I may pull a handful of Chaeto out of the tank and throw it in the trash. Quarterly, I'll perform the same power head and pump maintenance, and I will also clean out the calc reactor and add fresh calc. To be honest, I don't know how long the calc in the reactor will last. Right now, I'm only dosing 350 milliliters a day of saturated calc solution, so I do anticipate that the reactor can hold enough calc to keep it saturated for months. Time will tell. The SPS tank is nearly identical to LPS in terms of maintenance. However, in this case, I do have a skimmer to clean once a week. I may try and figure out if I have space for a skimmate receptacle to cut this down. Monthly, I'm just going to add some additional calc washer as needed to the reactor, but like the LPS tank, clean out that reactor quarterly. We also need to change out the UV lamp every year or so. So that's about all there is to it. We'll record the amount of time put into the tank and of course progress of the tank at the same time. I'm pretty excited to see how this all pans out. Okay, so on to potentially the biggest question of the ULM series. Jeremy over at Brightwell Aquatics is someone that I've spent many dozens of hours bouncing ideas and concepts off of, always sharpening and challenging me when I need it, and just so happens that he happens to watch all of these videos end to end as well. Having intelligent, engaged peers willing to give me their time is absolutely a huge component of providing the best content possible to the community, so a big thank you to him for asking the hard questions. In that spirit, at last week's InterZoo, he bought me a beer and asked, Ryan, why are you telling people to not do water changes in this ULM series? Meaning if everyone runs out and does this, a lot of them are going to run into real challenges. Many may even fail completely. This is something that I have to completely agree with. Really hit me like a ton of bricks that some of the new approach to our new video series can really get lost in the messaging. So I shared why we're talking about modern methods of reef keeping and potentially reducing or nearly eliminating water changes. But if someone who understands me very well has that question, I think a lot of reefers might. So I'm going to answer that question directly. So there are a few reasons. Many reefers have been talking about not needing water changes for a very long time, and there are even new methods now being built around that very concept. Second, I don't mind doing water changes if they have real value, but I also don't like wasting my own time and resources. Third, I've seen many instances where when water changes are one of the most important elements of maintaining chemistry, I also see as one of the biggest risk factors to the tank over time, because life always gets in the way and can prevent reefers from performing time-consuming water changes, at which point the tank just goes south. So are there modern alternative methods that fit today's busy lifestyles? So the most important component to understand here is I'm a million miles away from directly recommending that anyone stops doing water changes. Quite the opposite. What we're doing is testing concepts like these and documenting the results so we can learn together without risking our home's display tanks. So there's a significant difference between the Tank Trial series and some of the other series that we've done in the past. For instance, the 52 weeks of reefing, which was really sharing as much information and experience with the community as possible, and giving fairly direct advice at the end as to what we think are amongst the best options. If you did it this way, you'll almost certainly be successful. With the Tank Trials and ULM series, what we're doing is something very different. We're taking some concepts, many of which challenge common thought on how things should be done, but backed with plausible theory and testing them on real tanks so you don't have to play mad scientist with your own tanks. Because Tank Trials deviates pretty drastically from what we've done over the last few years, I think the lines between direct advice and concepts that we're testing could be a bit blurry. Even though I believe it's possible to reduce our reliance on water changes to solve chemistry issues, I would certainly not tell anyone to run out and stop doing water changes, because I want to have a couple years of success before sharing direct advice. For those of you who have had success with very few water changes, I would say almost all have one thing in common. They all have many years of reefing experience under their belts and are very often doing this with long-term established tanks. Most did not start with no water changes from the beginning. In fact, this is often the result of a diminished reliance on water changes over time as a tank becomes more stable and less reliant on that type of manual management of tank chemistry. So similar to that, I would like to think that the BRS team and I have a fair bit of reefing experience under our belts, and the tank that we're testing, the Triton method of limited water changes, is going very well with the 160. But again, this is a multi-year established tank with a very robust, stable filtration system, so probably similar to the lion's share of other success stories. However, in contrast to that, with Tank Trials, we have 3 tanks, all brand new, one of which gets automatic 3% water changes, which so far is actually looking like the easiest way to do this, primarily because I just know automatically changing out a majority of the water each month is going to work, and it's almost no effort. The other 2 tanks are intentionally going to receive very few water changes from day one, something that I've never done before with a brand new tank, and how that will pan out is a bit up in the air. We also have some unique or newer approaches here with the Kalkwasser reactor coupled with the Red Sea trace colors. So that gets to the second part of all this. Why even test this or talk about it if we're not 100% sure it will work? 2 reasons. First, progress. If we don't try new approaches based on plausible or at least likely theory, we'll never learn anything. Second, provide a long-term view into the actual implementation experience. Just reading an approach worked for one reefer and not the others in the forums is somewhat helpful, but often gives very little insight into the actual journey. By following the journey, most importantly being open and honest about the challenges, we can get significantly closer to why different reefers have different experiences and identify the path where most everyone can later follow and achieve the same results. So I think this is why I'm even interested in methods that rely on fewer water changes. The first time they encountered Triton, my initial response to eliminating maintenance water changes and only performing them when actually needed was pretty negative, because for the last decade, it's been my experience that 80% of the best tanks that I've encountered have one thing in common: a regular and reliable water change schedule. I'm sure that's at least partially because people who are willing to consistently perform water changes and put that kind of effort in their tanks are generally good about all kinds of maintenance and really in tune with their tanks. These tanks are also often inherently more stable because removing a portion of the contaminated water or water with less than ideal chemistry and replacing it with freshly mixed seawater is absolutely an effective solution and will improve the chemistry and quality of the water regardless of the tank that you're maintaining. However, I have to admit that after I looked at Triton with an open mind, I just couldn't get past the fact that I think the logic behind this approach is seemingly pretty sound, and I feel compelled to approach it with an open mind. Enough that I'm willing to risk a tank that's incredibly valuable to me personally with the 160. If I had to boil it down, there are only a few reasons to do a water change. The chemistry's out of whack, the water contains contaminants, or the water's visually dirty or smells. I think there may be more to it than this, but at face value, this is why most reefers would tell you that they're performing water changes to begin with. Historically, there was very little window into the tank's chemistry beyond calcium, alkalinity, magnesium, nutrients, and a handful of more difficult to accurately test for elements. Things are just different now, and we have way more advanced tools if we want to use them, such as ICP testing, which gives you a fairly complete picture of a lion's share of major, minor, and trace elements. It's important to note here that it isn't a perfect solution for every last element, but it's light years past the complete mystery that we were working with before. So with that in mind, if I tested and know that nutrients like phosphate and nitrate are low, not just major elements match natural seawater levels, but minor and trace elements also match natural seawater levels, the water's crystal clear and odor-free because I run carbon, and more important than anything else, the corals look healthy and are thriving, I'm really hard-pressed to identify a reason why I would dilute water which seemingly already matches natural seawater levels and doesn't have any measurable contaminants with new water that presumably matches natural seawater levels as well. In the end, our goal levels diluted with our goal levels is still our goal levels, and that seems like a big waste of time. This all seems pretty plausible, and I just couldn't confidently poke any super obvious holes in this logic, and because of that, felt it was worth testing on a real tank and taking everyone along for the journey. We've already done this to some degree with the 160 and Triton, but I don't think this is the only approach that can work. This is why we're exploring some different approaches to maintaining chemistry in a low water change environment, such as Kalkwater with Red Sea's trace colors on the SPS tank, and eventually graduating to a calcium reactor where I can't wait to see how effective melting coral skeleton is at matching the uptake of trace and minor elements, something that ICP should give us a solid window into. I certainly hope this adds some clarity as to why we're interested in these concepts and the difference between directly recommending them and a simple willingness to test them for the community on our own tanks as a single data point for other reefers to make their own decisions. If after a couple years we're achieving the same results that we are today, I think I'll transition to directly recommending some of these approaches because there are many upsides to not relying on hauling around buckets of water as an approach to maintaining water chemistry in the tank. So again, I thank Jeremy for asking and giving me this chance to share a bit deeper thought into this series. If you're ever at one of the Reefapaloozas or MACNA shows, stop by the Brightwell booth and say hi. Not only is the Brightwell team solid people, but they're also very knowledgeable, so they can probably help you with some of those more challenging questions you might have. All that said, if you're interested in trying at least a bit of what we're doing here, we're giving away that Avast Marine Kalk reactor this week. So click that link in the lower left to sign up, or head on over to the site, click on the specials and deals, and then free stuff to sign up. And if you like what we're doing here and want to see more, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be instantly notified of new releases every week. We'll see you next Friday with another episode of BRStv Tank Trials ULM Edition.